This week on Jerusalem Dateline, Honduras becomes the fourth country to open its embassy in Jerusalem, and Iran elects the hangman of Tehran as its president. What will it mean for Israel, the Middle East, and the world? Plus, a solidarity mission takes Israelis to the U.S. to stand with the Jewish community against anti-Semitism. All this and more this week on Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. We opened with good news today. Honduras became the fourth country to open its embassy in Jerusalem after the 2018 move of the U.S. Embassy and President Trump's recognition of the Holy City as Israel's eternal capital. Many see this as a positive sign that more countries will also recognize Jerusalem as the capital of the Jewish state. Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernandez told CBN News why moving the embassy marked a special day for his country.
It's a unique day in our history, and this is a recognition from all people to the people of Israel. And I believe that this is going to be good today and tomorrow.
Upon following through on the commitment, Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett recognized the courage it took Hernandez to move the embassy.
Mr. President, Honduras, under your leadership, stands consistently with Israel in the international institutions when it is not always popular, and sometimes it comes with a cost. And this is the evidence of the friendship and the willingness to take action, including paying a price. And I want to thank you and the public in Honduras for this support.
Some see today not only as an historic day for the nation of Honduras, but also part of an ongoing prophetic movement.
So what Honduras is doing, in a way, it aligns itself, you can say, with God's purposes for this nation, but not only Israel, but for the whole world. And I'm convinced that God is going to bless Honduras for that.
A delegation of nearly 20 pastors joined President Hernandez.
The Lord is helping us to have a better relationship with a country that we are in brotherhood.
While Honduras becomes the fourth country to move its embassy to Jerusalem, many expect more are coming.
I see that this is just the beginning. I think that we're going to see faith-based diplomacy grow in Latin America. In Africa, we're going to see an embassy move soon from the country of Malawi, Eastern Europe. This is a process that is happening all over the world.
President Hernandez felt a unique honor to be part of this moment in Honduran history.
I thank to God because He allowed me to be here in this moment, trying to serve the Honduran people, and nobody else has been in this position to take this decision. Thank to God for allowing me to be here and to be part of this moment in history.
Israel's Chief of Staff General Aviv Kohavi met with his U.S. counterparts in Washington and delivered a warning about re-entering the Iranian nuclear deal. Back in Tehran, Iran announced the results of the election for its new president, Ibrahim Raisi. Many believe the election of Raisi sends an ominous signal to Israel, the region, and the world. As Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei boasted how the Iranian nation fulfilled its democratic responsibilities, many others called the election a sham.
They didn't even put up the facade of democracy. It was a one-man race. Anyone who could have threatened his victory was screened by the Guardian Council about a month ago, so they wouldn't get in the way.
As a prosecutor and member of the infamous death committees in the 1980s, the incoming president, Ibrahim Raisi, earned the nickname the Hangman of Tehran.
The executioner is now in the head of the executive branch. He sentenced thousands of people to death. There are the death sentences of the mass murders of 1988 that were buried in common graves without even marking.
In 2019, the U.S. government placed sanctions on Raisi, and Amnesty International has called for him to be charged with crimes against humanity. Official results indicate less than 50% of Iranians voted, an historic low turnout. Some claim it was even less, as dozens of videos online show no one at many polls.
ریاست جمهوری که از قبل مشخص شده است
In an election where they know a murderer will win, why hold it?
These Iranian mothers joined an online appeal to boycott the election.
Dear brave Iranians, don't vote in these elections. We have been voting for 40 years. This is the result. They killed our children.
In Jerusalem, new Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett says the election results will hopefully open the eyes of the world to see Iran for what it truly is.
Raisi's selection is, I would say, the last chance for the world powers to wake up before returning to the nuclear agreement and to understand who they're doing business with. These guys are murderers, mass murderers. A regime of brutal hangmen must never be allowed to have weapons of mass destruction that will enable it to not to kill thousands but millions.
During his first press conference as president-elect, Raisi said he will not meet with Joe Biden, and he insists Iran's ballistic missile program and its support of regional militias like Hezbollah are non-negotiable. Gary Lane discussed Iran's new president with Benham Ben Taleblu, a senior fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies.
Renegotiation of the landmark 2015 nuclear deal, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, continues in Vienna. Those involved in those talks with Iran, China, Russia, France, Germany, and Britain say they're nearing a deal. So Iran is now at 60%, a 60% level of uranium enrichment, and it won't be long before they have enough for a nuclear bomb. So how likely is it that this agreement will prevent that from happening, Ben?
Well, if the Biden administration, along with the international partners that you mentioned here, actually spends all this time resurrecting this fatally flawed and fast expiring nuclear-only deal, then there is no guarantee at all, because this deal never really prevented Iran from getting a nuclear weapon anyway. It simply was a timeout for some of Iran's most sensitive nuclear programs. And of course, now knowing what we know with the Israeli Atomic Archive, it didn't even pause the entire Iranian program, because there is more undeclared sites, more undeclared facilities, more undeclared material than was previously known in 2015 or 2016. So there is very little strategic utility, in my view, in spending all this time, all this capital, resurrecting a deal that is so fatally flawed. And you can see the proof in the pudding. It's not just me telling you. The hard right flank in Iran that Raisi is from, many of them actually covet this deal now. Raisi is talking about, at least during the presidential debates, he talked about being a better enforcer of the JCPOA. And his first press conference after getting elected, or after getting selected, I should say, was about not extending it, not making it longer and stronger and broader like the Biden team wants. So in many ways, spending all this time, energy, and capital, particularly while the Iranian people are suffering, and particularly when the regime feels so comfortable putting a mass murderer at the helm, is not wise.
So full steam ahead towards nuclear development. What might this new hardline president then, and a potential renegotiated nuclear deal with Iran, mean for Israel and the United States?
Well, when it comes to the foreign and security policy, it's really more a question of volume. It's not like he's going to be able to change the trajectory overnight, nor does he even intend to, but he can make a bad situation even worse. The Iranian supreme leader gives guidelines, goalposts, policy end states, directions, and red lines, but really there is a certain measure of latitude afforded to each president. So you could probably expect to see a lot of the same regional escalation and a lot of the same regional worries that the U.S. force posture is going to have in places like Iraq, in places like the Persian Gulf, that the Israelis are going to have to continue to deal with this situation where the Iranians are trying to amass more and more militias and men on Israel's borders, north and south, of course, and arming them, training them, equipping them. So the situation, even from the non-nuclear perspective, is not good in the short term.
And even more cyber warfare here. I understand that Iran says the United States acted to shut down some of their news sites.
Well, this may be some good news in the world of deplatforming for those of us who are watching the more digital space. There are entities, as you know, that take advantage of the fact that they have a .com domain. The U.S. government has broad authority, of course, to rid some of these entities that may be pressing for incitement or supporting terror or be connected to state sponsors of terrorism. Press TV is one good example of a website that was recently removed from the .com, according to the recent press release from the USG.
Up next, Israeli officials pay a solidarity visit to American Jews during the recent spike in anti-Semitic attacks. American Christians and Jews usually come on solidarity missions to stand with Israel. But Jerusalem's deputy mayor led a special delegation to the U.S. to stand with Jewish communities that are suffering from a rise in anti-Semitism. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl spoke with Flor Hassan Nahum about that special mission.
We are leading a solidarity mission to New York. We're literally meeting from morning to evening with different rabbis from different communities, with federations, with the different organizations dealing with anti-Semitism. And we're very happy to be here in order to show solidarity to a community with these issues.
How serious is the anti-Semitism there? Are they afraid?
What we've heard is really a combination of narratives. We've heard people who are afraid for their children. We've heard people who are saying, you know what, it was a bad month. There was a lot going on. It was coming out of Corona. It was the war in Gaza. It's not so terrible, but we need to keep looking and checking that it doesn't get worse. So really there's a range of feelings going on here. But I think the overwhelming feeling is...
How serious is the anti-Semitism there? Are they afraid?
That they're very touched that a group of Israeli leaders are coming. It's like a reverse solidarity, because normally we're always receiving groups from this area, from the United States, in solidarity with Israel. Every time there's a conflict, every time there's a war.
You visited Riverdale. They've experienced some particular attacks recently. What did you see there?
So in Riverdale, we went to a range of Jewish communities, Chabad, ultra-Orthodox, modern Orthodox, and conservative. 3 synagogues were affected by stone throwing. And of course, they became much more on edge about the whole thing, the community. But what was very impressive to me was the unity between all these different streams in one community in Riverdale.
I've visited in Paris, and there the Jews are afraid to walk around with a kippah on, with a yarmulke, and they're afraid to let it be known that they're Jewish many times. Do you sense that at all in the U.S.?
When you speak to the majority of the people that I've seen, they're like, look, we're not afraid. This is Manhattan. And the truth is, I've seen a lot of people, certainly in the Jewish neighborhoods, wearing kippot without any fear.
Is this encouraging anybody to make aliyah, to want to come to Israel?
From what I know from my friends in Nefesh B'Nefesh and the Jewish Agency, is that there has been a huge increase in applications filled out to make aliyah. I haven't quantified, see how many are coming from here. But I think in general, the COVID has created a feeling for people, for Jews around the world, that they'd like to be in Israel. That ultimately the diaspora and Israel, we're one people. And we have had the unwavering support of diaspora communities. The diaspora communities built Israel, let's be honest. Now, we're in a different place after, 72 years, 73 years of Israel, where we've become a strong country. I think this is now the moment for this to be a different relationship, a more evolved relationship, where the communities help us when we need it, but we help the communities when they need it. And that's our message here. We are here for whatever you need. Israel is a country of unprecedented innovation. If you need help for your current challenges, we have definitely the innovation and the solutions to help you.
Up next, the 12th Imam, a mysterious Shia figure who is motivating the Iranian regime. The return of the 12th Imam. It's a core belief of Shia Muslims, and it's behind their drive of regional and global domination, destroying the Jewish state and driving the U.S. out of the Middle East. Here's a story CBN's George Thomas did several years ago about these end-of-the-world beliefs of many of Iran's leaders during the time of former Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. It's still clearly relevant in Iran today.
Amidst the chants of death to America, death to Israel, President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad recently announced to massive crowds in Iran that a new Middle East is emerging.
With the grace of God and thanks to the resistance of nations, the new Middle East will be realized soon without the American and the Zionist regimes.
He says the chaos in the region is organized by the Imam Mahdi. The final move has begun, Ahmadinejad said. We are in the middle of a world revolution managed by this deer, reference here to the 12th Imam. A great awakening is unfolding. One can witness the hand of Imam in managing it. To trace Ahmadinejad's messianic and end-time beliefs, you have to go to a mosque in the small village of Jamkaran, tucked in a corner of Iran. Behind this mosque, there is a well, and according to Ahmadinejad and millions of Shiite Muslims, out of this well will emerge one day their version of an Islamic savior. They call him the Mahdi, or the 12th Imam. Joel Rosenberg has written a book about it.
It was believed that this Islamic leader was going to come back one day at the end of time and bring justice to the earth.
Tens of thousands of Muslims visit the sacred well each night. The opening of the well is covered by a green-like metal box to prevent people from jumping in. Most of the time here is spent praying and kissing the metal box. Others scribble prayer requests to the Mahdi on pieces of paper that are then dropped into the well. Many, like this young boy with a flashlight, believe the Mahdi is actually hiding at the bottom of the well, reading those prayer requests.
I was looking into the well with my flashlight, hoping to see the Mahdi, but not tonight.
According to Shia scholars, the Mahdi, a descendant of the Prophet Muhammad, vanished in the middle of the 9th century.
Shia Muslims expect the 12th Imam to return at the end of history, at the end of days, when there's a time of great genocide, warfare, chaos in the world.
Sunnis, who make up the majority of Muslims in the world, have different views on the Mahdi. For instance, they believe the Mahdi is yet to be born and will descend from Fatima, the daughter of the Prophet Muhammad. Shia Muslims believe the 12th Imam is alive and will reappear before the Day of Judgment. Brother Wahid, a Muslim convert to Christianity, hosts a popular television show seen across the Middle East.
Absolutely. All Muslims are required to believe in the end times. Despite these theological differences between Shia and Sunnis on the Islamic Messiah, belief in the last days is mandatory.
Enter Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. Since becoming the president of Iran back in 2005, Ahmadinejad has emerged as the Mahdi's most influential follower. In almost all his speeches, whether at home in Iran or traveling abroad, the president begs Allah to hasten the return of the Mahdi.
O God, hasten the arrival of Imam Mahdi and grant him good health and victory and make us his followers.
Ahmadinejad is reportedly tied to a radical Islamic society in Iran that believes man can hasten the appearance of the Mahdi
by annihilating two countries, Israel, which they call the Little Satan, and the United States, which they call the Great Satan.
Shias and Sunnis believe the end days will be marked by apocalyptic times.
Just before the Mahdi returns, there will be chaos throughout the world. Wars, famines, and floods will ravage the earth. But when the Mahdi comes, he will bring peace and justice.
Muslims believe that when the Mahdi returns, he will be accompanied by Jesus Christ, also known in Islam as the Prophet Isa.
They believe that Jesus will physically return to this world. He will kill the pigs, break the crosses, kill the Jews, and defeat the Antichrist.
But until that day comes, Ahmadinejad, who sees himself as a kind of John the Baptist figure, is telling the world to prepare.
He believes the end of time is near, that the Islamic Messiah is coming, and the way to accelerate or hasten the 12th Imam's arrival and reign on earth is to destroy Judeo-Christian civilization as we know it.
George Thomas, CBN News.
Still ahead, CBN Israel helping new immigrants hit hard by the COVID pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic hit everyone hard, and Ludmila, a new immigrant from the Ukraine, was no exception. She could barely afford basic food for her children. Take a look at how CBN Israel helped her out.
Ludmila is a single mom from Ukraine. She and her children moved to Israel to start their lives over. She got a job taking care of the elderly, but then the COVID-19 pandemic hit.
I was still struggling to learn Hebrew, and I didn't know where to go for help.
For Ludmila, the hardest part was seeing how it affected her children.
It broke me, trying to explain to them why we could only eat the cheapest, most basic food.
Then another new immigrant told Ludmila about CBN Israel. When we learned about Ludmila, we started taking her groceries.
The food is very nutritious, and my kids really enjoy it. It was such a wonderful surprise for you to do this for us. It gave me hope.
Ludmila recently started a new job cleaning at her local courthouse. She says it provides more stability with flexible work hours. Thanks to CBN donors, Ludmila's family got the food they'd needed to see them through this crisis. Now they can build the future they hoped for in Israel.
I'm very grateful for what you've done for my family during this time. There have been many challenges, and your support has meant everything. Thank you.
That's a good news story here in Israel. Well, that's all for this edition. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. You can also access CBN content through our CBN News and other CBN apps. And don't forget to sign up for our email blast so you can continue to receive all of our exciting CBN content. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time